The rescue mission. The distress signal. Captain Theron of the galactic science vessel Meridian had been monitoring deep space signals for 12 years. In all that time, he'd never heard anything quite like this. The distress beacon was weak, flickering in and out of existence like a dying star. But what made it remarkable wasn't the signal strength, it was the location. The transmission was coming from inside the scorched belt, a region of space so hostile that every known species had declared it a no-fly zone. "Captain," his communications officer said, her crystalline face reflecting worry. "The signal is from a research team. 15 scientists. Their ship suffered catastrophic failure. Life support is failing." Theron's forearms tensed on his command chair. The scorched belt was a graveyard. Solar radiation that could cook flesh in minutes. Gravity wells that could crush ships like paper. Asteroid fields moving at velocities that made navigation suicide. How long until their life support fails completely? 6 hours. Maybe less. Theron looked at his crew. They were the best in the galaxy, scientists, explorers, survivors of a dozen dangerous missions. But this? This was different. "We can't go in there," his pilot said quietly. "Our shields won't hold. The radiation alone would kill us." Theron knew he was right. Every calculation said the same thing: attempting a rescue would kill everyone on both ships. The logical choice was to send a message of regret and move on. But logic didn't account for the 15 lives counting down their final hours. The impossible volunteer. There might be another option. Everyone turned to look at the speaker. Dr. Sarah Chen, the ship's human medical officer, stepped forward from where she'd been observing quietly. "The human suggests an option?" Theron's science officer said with barely concealed skepticism. "No offense, Doctor, but your species has only been spacefaring for 50 years. What could you possibly—" "I can go," Sarah interrupted. "In a rescue pod. Alone." The bridge fell silent. "Dr. Chen," Theron said carefully. "Did you hear the conditions? Solar radiation levels are fatal to every known species within minutes." "Fatal to every known species," Sarah agreed. "But humans evolved under different conditions than most species. Our sun, what we call Sol, is unusually aggressive. Our planet sits in what most species would consider the death zone of our solar system." She pulled up data on the main screen. "Earth's surface is bombarded by radiation constantly. Our atmosphere barely filters it. Our oceans are salted with corrosive compounds. Our weather systems generate electrical storms with millions of volts. Our tectonic plates shift and create earthquakes. Our planet is, by galactic standards, a nightmare." "We know Earth is a death world," the science officer said. "That's not. What you might not know," Sarah continued, "is that death worlds forge death-resistant life. Human skin has multiple layers specifically designed to absorb and resist radiation. Our cells have repair mechanisms that activate under stress. Our bodies produce melanin, a natural radiation shield. We're built for environments that would kill most of you instantly." Theron studied the human. She was small compared to most of his crew, standing barely 5.5 feet tall with brown skin and dark eyes. She looked fragile. But he'd worked with her for 3 years and learned that appearances deceived when it came to humans. "The radiation in the scorched belt is exponentially higher than your sun produces," Theron said. "I know. I'll need a specialized suit. 30 minutes to prepare. But I can survive the trip long enough to reach them and bring them back one at a time if necessary." "You could die." Sarah smiled, that strange human expression that showed teeth but meant something other than threat. "Captain, my ancestors crossed oceans in wooden boats. They climbed mountains that touched the sky. They walked on the surface of our moon before they even had decent computers. Humans don't let impossible stop us. We just figure out how to make it possible. Preparation and launch." Theron gave the order. They had nothing to lose. If they did nothing, 15 people died. If Sarah failed, 16 people died. But if she succeeded? The engineering team worked frantically, modifying a rescue pod for the mission. They reinforced the shielding, added emergency oxygen reserves, installed a beacon that could punch through the interference. Sarah prepared in the medical bay, running diagnostics on her body, taking supplements that would help her cells resist radiation damage, running through meditation techniques that slowed her heart rate and oxygen consumption. Dr. Chen, Theron found her in the prep room. I need you to understand, if something goes wrong, we cannot come after you. The Meridian cannot enter the belt. I understand, Captain. Then why are you doing this? You barely know the research team. They're not even human. Sarah was quiet for a moment, adjusting the seals on her suit. When I was 8 years old, I fell through ice into a frozen lake. I was drowning, dying from cold. A stranger, someone who didn't know me, jumped in and pulled me out. He nearly died saving me. She looked up at Theron. I asked him later why he did it. Why risk his life for a random kid? You know what he said? Because I could. That's it. Not because it was smart or safe or because he expected reward. Just because he had the ability to help, and that was reason enough. She sealed her helmet. Those 15 people are dying. I have the ability to help. That's reason enough. Into the belt. The rescue pod launched from the Meridian like a bullet from a gun, Sarah strapped inside with nothing but her suit, her training, and the stubborn human refusal to accept the word impossible. The scorched belt enveloped her immediately. Through the pod's small viewport, she could see solar flares dancing in the distance, massive eruptions of plasma that could vaporize a planet. Asteroids tumbled through space at velocities that turned them into weapons. Radiation levels climbed on her instruments, rising from dangerous to lethal to incomprehensible. Chen to Meridian, Sarah transmitted. Entering the belt. Radiation levels climbing but manageable. Manageable? The communications officer's voice crackled with interference. Doctor, those levels would cook most species alive. Good thing I'm not most species, Sarah replied, her hand steady on the controls despite the pod shaking from gravitational turbulence. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in human stubbornness. Sarah navigated through debris fields that should have been impossible to traverse, dodged radiation bursts that her instruments couldn't predict fast enough, and pushed the pod's engines beyond their designed limits. Her body was taking damage. She could feel it, the heat building under her skin, the way her vision occasionally blurred, the metallic taste in her mouth that meant cellular breakdown. But human bodies were designed to take damage and keep functioning. Pain was just information. Exhaustion was just a suggestion. The distressed research vessel appeared on her sensors, a twisted wreck of metal barely holding together. Sarah brought her pod alongside, matching rotation, and executed a docking procedure that would have been challenging under perfect conditions and was nearly suicidal here. The airlock sealed. The connection held. The survivors. Sarah entered the research vessel to find 15 pairs of eyes staring at her in disbelief. The crew was a mix of species, Vexillian, Thraxian, Queller, others she didn't immediately recognize. All of them looked terrified and hopeless. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen from the GSV Meridian, she announced. I'm here to get you out. The research captain, a tall Vexillian with blue scales, spoke first. How? Your vessel can't enter the belt. Our long-range sensors showed. The Meridian can't, Sarah agreed. But I can. Rescue pod attached to your airlock. It holds 3 passengers plus pilot. We'll need to make 5 trips. 5 trips? One of the scientists laughed, a sound edged with hysteria. Through that radiation? You'll be dead after 1. Sarah checked her suit's readings. Her radiation exposure was already significant. 5 trips would push her to the edge of survival. Maybe past it. Probably, Sarah admitted. Which is why we need to move fast. Who's smallest? We'll pack you in tight. The first trip. The first trip back was relatively smooth. 3 scientists crammed into the rescue pod, Sarah piloting through the chaos with the same focused determination. She delivered them to the Meridian and immediately turned back despite Theron's medical officer insisting she needed decontamination treatment. "No time," Sarah said simply. 12 more to go. The second trip was harder. Sarah's hands shook on the controls. Her vision blurred more frequently. The radiation was accumulating in her body, breaking down cells faster than they could repair. The third trip, Sarah started bleeding from her nose. Her skin felt like it was burning from the inside. "Dr. Chen," Theron's voice was tight with worry. "Your vitals are critical. You need medical attention." "After," Sarah gasped. 9 more. The breaking point. The fourth trip nearly killed her. Halfway back to the Meridian, Sarah's vision went dark. She'd pushed her body beyond its limits, radiation poisoning overwhelming her cell's ability to cope. The pod drifted off course. But then, and Theron would later say this was the most incredible thing he'd ever witnessed, Sarah's vitals spiked. Not declining, but spiking upward. Her heart rate increased. Her oxygen consumption jumped. "What's happening?" the medical officer asked. Sarah's voice came through the calm, rough but determined. "Adrenaline. Humans produce it in crisis situations. Overrides pain, exhaustion, even cellular damage temporarily. My body knows I'm not done yet." She corrected course manually, navigating by instruments she could barely see, and delivered 3 more survivors. The fifth and final trip was a blur of pain and determination. Sarah's body was shutting down in stages, but she'd made a promise. 15 lives. She'd save all 15 or die trying. When she finally docked with the Meridian for the last time, delivering the final 3 survivors, Sarah Chen collapsed in the airlock. Her radiation exposure was triple what should have been fatal. Her body temperature was dangerously high. Her organs were beginning to fail. "Get her to medical," Theron shouted. "Now." The aftermath. The medical bay became a study in contrasts, alien medical technology trying to save a human body that refused to follow the rules. Sarah Chen should have been dead 6 different ways. Her radiation exposure alone should have killed her hours ago. But human biology had evolved on a death world. Human cells had evolved to repair themselves. Human bodies had evolved to survive what should be unsurvivable. For 3 days, Sarah floated between life and death. The Meridian's medical staff worked around the clock, combining their advanced technology with their growing understanding of human resilience. On the 4th day, Sarah opened her eyes. "Did we get them all?" were her first words. Theron, who'd barely left the medical bay, felt something unfamiliar, tears forming in his eyes, something his species rarely experienced. "All 15. Because of you. Because one human refused to accept that impossible meant anything." Sarah tried to smile, though her face was still healing. "Death World native. We're stubborn like that." Recovery and revelation. Dr. Sarah Chen spent 2 weeks in the medical bay recovering from what should have been lethal radiation exposure. The Meridian's medical staff watched in fascination as her body healed itself at a rate that defied conventional biology. "It's remarkable," the Vexillian medical officer said during morning rounds. "Her cells are regenerating faster than any species I've studied. The radiation damage should have been permanent, but her DNA repair mechanisms are actually reversing the destruction." Captain Theron stood by Sarah's bedside, reviewing the data. "How is this possible?" Sarah, still weak but conscious, managed a small laugh. "Earth doesn't give you a choice. You either adapt or die. My ancestors survived ice ages, plagues, predators, starvation, radiation from our aggressive sun, everything the universe threw at us. The ones who survived passed down the genes for stubbornness and adaptation. I'm just carrying on the family tradition." The 15 rescued scientists visited her regularly, still processing their survival. The research captain, a Vexillian named Kalayer, brought gifts from his home world, crystals that caught light and threw rainbows across the medical bay walls. You shouldn't have survived even one trip through the belt, Kalair said quietly. But you made 5. You saved us all when logic said it was impossible. Why? Sarah thought about that stranger who'd pulled her from the frozen lake 20 years ago. Because someone needed help, and I could provide it. Isn't that reason enough? Not for most species, Kalair admitted. We calculate risk versus reward. We analyze probability. We make logical decisions based on optimal outcomes. And where does that leave the 15 people dying in space? Kalair had no answer. The report. 3 weeks after the rescue, Sarah was cleared for duty. Her radiation levels had dropped to normal ranges, her body had processed and expelled the damage in ways the medical staff was still trying to understand. She'd survived what should have killed her 3 times over. Captain Theron called her to his office. Dr. Chen, I've been asked to write a report about the rescue mission for Galactic Command. They want to understand how it was possible. Sarah sat down carefully, still regaining her full strength. What will you tell them? The truth. That a human, despite every calculation showing impossibility, saved 15 lives through sheer determination and biological adaptation to hostile environments. He paused. But they're asking larger questions now. Questions about humanity's place in galactic society. What kind of questions? Theron pulled up a holographic display showing dozens of messages from various galactic institutions. Scientific academies wanting to study human biology. Military organizations asking about human endurance. Medical facilities requesting information on human cellular repair mechanisms. Humanity has been part of galactic civilization for 50 years, Theron explained. But we've always seen you as the newcomers, the young species still learning. This mission changed that perception. Because I survived some radiation? Because you did what none of us could. Because your death world origins gave you capabilities we didn't know were possible. Theron's forearms gestured to the data. You've made the galaxy realize that maybe Earth being a harsh planet wasn't a disadvantage. Maybe it was preparation. The presentation. Galactic Command requested that Sarah present her findings about human adaptation to a council of scientists from 40 different species. The presentation was held via holographic link, with representatives from across known space attending. Sarah stood in front of the assembly, still wearing the faint marks of her ordeal, skin that was healing from radiation burns, a body that moved with the careful deliberation of someone recovering from trauma. I'm not a scientist, Sarah began. I'm a doctor. But I grew up on Earth, and that makes me an expert in surviving what shouldn't be survivable. She displayed images of Earth, blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. Beautiful from space. But then she showed the reality beneath. This is the Sahara Desert. Temperatures that reach 136 degrees Fahrenheit. Humans live there. This is Antarctica. Temperatures that drop to minus 128 degrees Fahrenheit. Humans live there too. This is Mount Everest. Altitude so high that most species would lose consciousness from oxygen deprivation. Humans climb it for recreation. Murmurs spread through the assembly. Earth sits closer to our sun than is comfortable. Our atmosphere is thin enough that we're constantly exposed to radiation. Our weather is violent, we have storms that generate more energy than nuclear weapons. Our oceans are deep and dark and filled with pressure that would crush most ships. Our planet has earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, droughts, and ice ages. Sarah paused. By galactic standards, Earth is a nightmare. But for humans? It's home. And because it's our home, we adapted to survive its challenges. She pulled up her medical data from the rescue mission. During my 5 trips through the scorched belt, I absorbed enough radiation to kill most species 50 times over. But human cells have evolved repair mechanisms specifically designed to handle radiation damage. Our skin produces melanin, a natural shield. Our DNA has multiple redundancy systems. Our bodies can trigger emergency responses that override pain and exhaustion. A Thraxian scientist raised a tentacle. But surely there are limits? You nearly died. Nearly, Sarah agreed. But nearly dead isn't dead. Humans have a saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's literally true for us. Our bodies learn from stress and adapt to become more resistant. The questions. The presentation opened into a discussion that lasted hours. Scientists from across the galaxy wanted to understand human resilience, human adaptation, human stubbornness in the face of impossible odds. How do humans maintain morale when facing certain death? A Queller psychologist asked. Sarah thought about the frozen lake, about the stranger who'd jumped in knowing he might die. We tell ourselves stories. We remember people who came before us and survived impossible things. We think about people we love and who love us. And we decide that giving up isn't an option because someone else might need us to succeed. But that's not logical, the psychologist protested. No, Sarah agreed. It's not. It's human. Logic says preserve yourself. Humanity says preserve the tribe. Logic says calculate the odds. Humanity says make the impossible possible through sheer stubbornness. A military commander from a warrior species spoke next. Are all humans capable of this kind of endurance? To varying degrees, yes. Some of us are stronger, some faster, some more resistant to specific challenges. But all of us carry the genes of survivors. All of us are descended from ancestors who faced impossible situations and refused to quit. The proposal. At the end of the presentation, the head of the Galactic Medical Council made an announcement that surprised everyone. Dr. Chen, your rescue mission has exposed a significant gap in our understanding. Most galactic species evolved on worlds that were, relatively speaking, gentle. Our survival strategies involve logic, planning, technology to overcome our biological limitations. The council head, an elderly Qualix with silver skin, continued. But you've shown us that biological adaptation to harsh environments creates capabilities that technology can't replicate. We'd like to propose a comprehensive study of human resilience, with human participation and consent, of course. What kind of study? Sarah asked carefully. We want to understand how death world adaptation translates to survival in extreme situations. We want to learn if these adaptations can be replicated, enhanced, or shared with other species. We want to understand what makes humans survive when everyone else would fail. Sarah looked at Captain Theron, who nodded encouragingly. I'll participate, Sarah said. But on one condition. This isn't about making humans into weapons or tools. This is about understanding that survival comes in many forms. That sometimes the greatest strength isn't logic or technology, it's the stubborn refusal to give up when everything says you should. The council agreed. 3 months later. The study of human resilience became one of the largest collaborative research projects in galactic history. Scientists from 40 species worked with human volunteers to understand the biological, psychological, and social factors that made humans uniquely suited for survival in hostile environments. Sarah returned to her duties on the Meridian, but now with an additional role, liaison between human researchers and galactic scientists. She gave presentations, answered questions, and helped bridge the gap between species who solved problems through logic and species who solved problems through determination. One evening, she found Captain Theron in the observation deck, looking at the stars. Captain, Sarah said, joining him. You look contemplative. Theron's forearms gestured at the vast expanse of space. I've been thinking about what you said during your presentation. That humans tell themselves stories to maintain morale. What story do you tell yourself? Sarah smiled. That the universe is vast and dangerous and full of challenges that seem impossible. But humans have been facing impossible challenges since before we could write. We crossed oceans without knowing what was on the other side. We climbed mountains because they were there. We went to space because we looked up and wondered what was beyond our sky. And now you're here, light years from Earth, saving alien scientists from radiation belts that should kill you. Just continuing the tradition, Sarah said. Humans don't stop at impossible. We just figure out how to spell it differently. Impossible. The legacy. The Scorched Belt rescue became legendary across galactic civilization, the story of one human who did what no one else could because she came from a planet that demanded the impossible every day. But more than the legend, the mission changed how the galaxy viewed humanity. They were no longer seen as the young newcomers, still learning the ways of space. Instead, they were recognized as survivors of a death world, a species forged by impossible challenges into something uniquely resilient. Medical facilities across the galaxy began incorporating human resilience training into their protocols. Emergency response teams studied human determination and stubbornness. Military forces examined how humans pushed past their biological limits when the stakes were high enough. The 15 rescued scientists became ambassadors for human capability, telling their story to anyone who would listen. Kalayer, the research captain, wrote a paper titled "Why Impossible Means Nothing to a Human" that became required reading at scientific academies. Sarah's reflection. 5 years after the rescue, Sarah Chen stood in the same observation deck where she'd talked with Captain Theron. But now she wasn't alone. 3 human crew members had joined the Meridian, specialists in emergency response, all trained to push past what other species considered impossible. The galaxy was learning what Earth had always known, that sometimes survival wasn't about having the best technology or the most logical plan. Sometimes survival was about refusing to quit. About pushing past pain and fear and exhaustion because someone needed help and you were there to provide it. Sarah thought about that stranger who'd pulled her from the frozen lake so many years ago. She'd asked him why he risked his life for a random kid. "Because I could," he'd said. She'd spent her life since then trying to live up to that simple philosophy. Because she could. Because someone needed help. Because being human meant looking at the word impossible and seeing it as just another challenge to overcome. Through the viewport, she could see distant solar systems, alien worlds, endless possibilities for challenges that needed human stubbornness to solve. And Sarah smiled, knowing that somewhere out there, another impossible situation was waiting for a human to prove that impossible just meant not yet achieved. The message. Before ending her shift, Sarah recorded a message that would be sent back to Earth, to be archived for future generations. To anyone who might listen, we humans came from a planet that tried to kill us every day. From deserts that scorched and winters that froze. From predators that hunted us and diseases that swept through our populations. From a sun that bombarded us with radiation and weather that destroyed everything we built. We survived. Not because we were the strongest or the smartest, but because we were the most stubborn. Because we looked at impossible challenges and refused to accept defeat. Because we told ourselves stories about ancestors who survived and made us believe we could too. Now we're among the stars, carrying that same stubborn determination. And when the galaxy faces impossible challenges, they're learning to call on humans. Not because we're fearless, we feel fear like everyone else. But because fear doesn't stop us. Pain doesn't stop us. Logic that says we should fail doesn't stop us. We're humans. We come from Earth, the impossible planet that forged impossible survivors. And we'll keep proving that impossible just means watch us do it anyway. Dr. Sarah Chen, GSV Meridian, signing off. Epilogue, The Ripple Effect. The message reached Earth 6 months later and became part of humanity's growing legend across the stars. Children in schools studied Sarah's rescue mission alongside ancient stories of human exploration and survival. Young humans joining the space services carried her words as inspiration. But the impact went beyond humanity. Across the galaxy, other species were re-evaluating what they considered possible. Scientists pushed past barriers they'd thought were absolute. Rescuers attempted missions they'd once deemed too dangerous. Explorers ventured into regions they'd labeled forbidden. All because one human had looked at certain death and said, "I can survive that long enough to save them." The Scorched Belt remained dangerous, a region of space that most ships avoided. But occasionally, when someone's sensors picked up a distress signal from inside that deadly zone, they didn't immediately give up hope. They asked, "Is there a human available?" Because the galaxy had learned an important lesson from Sarah Chen and her Death World origins. Impossible wasn't absolute. It was relative. And what was impossible for most species was just Tuesday for someone from Earth. The end. From HFY Codex Archives, thank you for joining us on this journey. Remember, impossible just means not yet achieved. If this story inspired you, leave a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Let's see how far stories of human determination can travel.